Lena Whitmore always thought the city was alive with ordinary noises, and Julian Cross never noticed the shadows following him. But when the subway car plunged into darkness that night, Lena's reflection twisted into something unrecognizable, and Julian realized he was no longer alone. The dark passenger had arrived, and it was waiting inside them both. I never thought a simple late-night commute could feel like stepping into a nightmare. The city lights stretched and blurred past the train windows as I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, staring at the reflection of my own tired face. The day had been long, draining, and I had expected this ride home to be ordinary, predictable, a chance to shut my mind off for a while. But tonight, something felt different. The air inside the train was heavier, almost sticky, and each passing streetlight outside seemed to cast shadows that didn't belong. I tried to shake the feeling off, telling myself I was just imagining things, that I was too tired, too stressed, but the unease wouldn't go away. The train car was nearly empty. A few passengers sat scattered, hunched over their phones or staring blankly out of the windows, but even they seemed off. Their movements were too slow, too deliberate, like they were shadows of real people rather than living, breathing humans. The hum of the train was hypnotic, almost comforting at first, until I realized that the sound was too uniform, too mechanical, like it was repeating itself over and over without variation. It made my skin crawl. I tried to focus on it, tried to let it lull me into ignoring the gnawing sensation at the back of my neck, but instead, it only drew my attention. There was something else. Something I couldn't see yet, but I could feel it. That's when I noticed him, or it, sitting across from me, a figure in a black coat that seemed to absorb the dim light in the train car. At first I thought it was a passenger, normal enough, but there was something wrong. The way he, or whatever he was, sat completely still, as if the world had passed him by, made my stomach tighten. His hood shadowed his face, and I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them, not looking at me, exactly, but through me, like they were digging into the core of me and finding my most secret fears. I tried to look away, to focus on the other passengers, the window, anything to distract myself, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place. As the train entered a long dark tunnel, the reflection in the glass caught my attention. For just a fraction of a second, I saw his face. And it wasn't a face. It was hollow, nothing but dark, sunken cavities where eyes should have been, a slit for a mouth that stretched too wide. My throat tightened and a shiver ran down my spine. I blinked rapidly, hoping it was a trick of the reflection, a shadow merging with mine. But when I looked again, the seat was empty. I wanted to tell myself I had imagined it, that fatigue and the eerie atmosphere of the tunnel had played a cruel trick on me. But then I heard it. The whisper came so softly that I almost thought it was my own mind playing tricks, a fragment of panic whispering from inside my head. But no, it was behind me, close and chillingly real. It didn't have words exactly, just a sound, a breathing that wasn't mine, a vibration in the air that seemed to press against my skull. I turned quickly, heart pounding, but the car was empty. Not a single shadow moved, not a single passenger shifted. I told myself to breathe, tried to focus on the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels, but the hum I had thought was comforting now felt like a pulse, like the heartbeat of something alive, something patient, waiting for me to notice. The air grew colder and I could see my own breath misting against the window. The longer I stared at the empty seat, the more I felt its presence. It wasn't gone. It had moved, but not far. It was behind me, all around me, a presence I could sense rather than see, a dark passenger riding with me. I couldn't shake the feeling. My body wanted to flee, to leap from the moving train, but my mind was paralyzed by fascination, by terror, by a sick curiosity I couldn't control. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to stop noticing, but I couldn't. I felt its attention like a weight pressing down on my chest, a cold touch that left a mark on my skin without leaving any physical trace. The train jolted slightly as it approached the next station, and I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to center myself, to remind myself it was just a train ride. But when I opened them, I froze. On the floor in front of me, stretching from my seat to the empty aisle, was a black stain, spreading slowly, like ink in water. It moved unnaturally, curling and writhing as if it had a life of its own, and in the center of it, I thought I saw a face not mine, not human, but hollow, grinning, watching me. I blinked and it was gone, but the sense of being watched remained, lingering, pressing, inescapable. I sank back into my seat, trembling. My reflection in the window no longer looked like me. It was stretched, hollowed, eyes deep and empty, mouth too wide. I wanted to scream, to wake up, to escape, but I knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. The dark passenger was riding with me, and it had chosen me first. The morning after that train ride, I tried to convince myself it had been a hallucination, a trick of fatigue or stress. I poured coffee, stared at my reflection in the kitchen window, and tried to laugh at the memory of the hollow-faced figure. But the unease clung to me like a second skin. Even in daylight, the world seemed off. Shadows stretched longer than they should. Corners of rooms looked darker and everything smelled faintly of smoke that wasn't there before. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself that the mind sometimes plays tricks, but deep down I knew it wasn't just imagination. Something had followed me home. The first sign came when I noticed my apartment felt altered. Things weren't exactly where I had left them. My keys, my wallet, even a stack of papers on the desk had shifted slightly. At first I thought it was absent-mindedness, maybe I had moved them without realizing, but the shifts weren't random. They seemed deliberate, like someone or something was watching, moving the objects just enough to make me notice. My stomach churned with a cold, creeping fear, and I found myself checking the corners of every room, peering under tables and behind furniture, even though I was sure the apartment was empty. Then the whispers started. Soft, almost imperceptible at first, like the rustle of paper or a breeze through a crack in the window. But they grew louder as the day went on, voices forming shapes in my mind, pulling words from my own thoughts. They didn't speak clearly, but the intent was undeniable. It wasn't human, and it wasn't kind. It wanted something. I couldn't tell what, but I could feel the pressure building, an invisible weight pressing on my chest every time I stopped moving. I tried leaving the apartment, hoping that distance would break the sense of being hunted. But the world outside was no refuge. People on the street glanced at me oddly, their expressions empty, their eyes too dark, lingering too long. Shadows in alleyways seemed to stretch toward me, reaching, shifting unnaturally. I felt the dark passenger moving just beyond my perception, riding invisibly beside me, always watching, always watching, always waiting. Each step I took made my heart pound, and every passing car, every flicker of light, felt like it carried a hidden message meant only for me. At home, the apartment seemed alive in new ways. The walls pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. Small things, at first a cup, a book, but soon larger, impossible movements. My reflection in the bathroom mirror began to look wrong. My eyes seemed hollow for a moment, my expression twisted, and I caught a glimpse of a shadow behind me, just at the edge of the glass. I spun around. Nothing, but I could feel its presence, curling around my back, pressing against me, an invisible weight that made every breath a struggle. Sleep offered no escape. At night, I would close my eyes and immediately see it sitting in the corner of my bedroom, grinning, hollow-faced, black coat draped over impossibly long shoulders. Its head would tilt slowly, deliberately, as if studying me, measuring me. I tried to turn over, pull the blankets up, hide, but the figure was everywhere, crawling along the ceiling, gliding across the floor, bending the shadows into impossible shapes. Sometimes I would wake in a cold sweat, certain that it had leaned over my bed while I slept, whispering words I couldn't fully understand but somehow felt in my bones. The hallucinations, or whatever they were, became more vivid with each passing night. I would see my apartment decay, walls crumbling into darkness, the floor sagging, shadows pooling like liquid, and always, the dark passenger moved through the destruction with impossible grace, its hollow gaze fixed on me. Sometimes it would appear in mirrors, sometimes in reflections of windows I hadn't even looked at. I could see myself standing there, frozen, terrified, and behind my own reflection. The hollow face would grin wider, silently mocking, silently claiming. The worst moment came when I checked my phone, hoping for the normalcy of notifications, messages, the mundane hum of the digital world. Instead, every app opened to a single message. "I'm already here." It appeared in texts I didn't send, emails I didn't write, even calendar reminders I never created. And when I tried to delete them, the words would rewrite themselves. My hands shook. I couldn't escape it. Even technology, even reality, had become a tool for it, bending everything around me. That night I woke to a sound I can't forget. The bedroom door creaked open slowly, the way it never did, and I could feel the air shift. The temperature dropped sharply, frosting the edges of my breath in front of me. I lay paralyzed, heart pounding, staring at the dark corner across the room, and then I felt it. A presence pressing against my bed, heavy, invisible, impossibly close. A breath, hot and foul, grazed my neck. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, and then a whisper curled in my ear, just loud enough for me to hear. "Soon you'll see me as I see you." Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it crawling beneath my skin, whispering my deepest fears, twisting them into vivid images that burned into my mind. I would see my apartment rotting from the inside, the walls crawling with black veins, the ceiling sagging, the floor trembling as if it were alive. Shadows gathered in corners, pooling like water, stretching impossibly long and thin, slithering along the edges of my vision, always moving, always watching. And somewhere within those shadows, I could feel it, patient, relentless, never speaking directly but communicating in the primal language of dread. I began to stop leaving the apartment entirely. Every time I thought about venturing outside, I could feel the dark passenger waiting just beyond the door, like an invisible predator pacing, ready to strike. I tried to hide, to fortify my sanctuary with locks and barriers, but it didn't care. No door, no wall, no mirror, no reflection could hold it back. It had ways of appearing anyway. In the faucet, a shape that lingered too long before vanishing. In the shower glass, a figure standing behind me that disappeared the moment I turned. In the hallway, Shadows warped into humanoid shapes that stretched and recoiled in impossible ways. I couldn't tell if it was the apartment itself becoming sentient, or if it had never truly left me at all. My reflection, once familiar, became a source of terror. I would look into the mirror and see my own face twisted, eyes hollow, skin pale and stretched in unnatural ways. Sometimes my mouth would move on its own, forming words I hadn't spoken, words that were cruel, mocking, terrifying. I began to avoid mirrors entirely, covering them with sheets, turning them toward walls. But even then, I could feel it watching, waiting for the moments I let my guard down. One night, I awoke to an unnatural stillness. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every small sound louder than it should be. My body was heavy, as though gravity had doubled overnight. I tried to rise, but my limbs felt rooted to the bed. That's when I saw it, standing at the foot of my bed, taller than the ceiling, impossibly long-limbed, its hollow face grinning down at me, empty eyes staring through me. It didn't move like a human. It flowed, like shadows given shape, stretching and folding over itself, defying logic, defying space. I couldn't scream. My voice was trapped somewhere deep in my chest. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would rupture. I wanted to close my eyes, to wish it away, but something compelled me to look, to see it fully. Its grin widened, impossibly wide, and I realized that my own face, reflected in the blackness where it should have been, was staring back at me, twisted, hollow, laughing silently. The dark passenger wasn't just outside me, it was inside me, wearing me, becoming me, and I could feel a cold, terrible certainty that the transformation was already underway. Days merged into nights, or maybe nights merged into days. I could no longer tell. Time had lost all meaning. I would wake to see the same shadow in the same corner, in the same impossible pose, always closer than the last time. Sometimes I caught glimpses of it in reflections I didn't think were mirrors, a window, a shiny countertop, the black screen of my phone. Always watching, always patient, always waiting. It had claimed my perception, rewriting reality around me, bending it so that my fear became tangible, almost physical, almost real. The hallucinations or perhaps visions became unbearable. I saw myself walking through my street, but the world had decayed. Buildings leaned at impossible angles, streets stretched endlessly, dark rivers of shadow replacing sidewalks, and behind me, gliding silently, moving faster than I could turn my head, was the dark passenger. Its hollow grin never wavered, its presence never faltered, and every step I took made my stomach twist in knots. I was both observer and victim, trapped in a waking nightmare I couldn't escape. Then came the moment that broke whatever remained of my sanity. I glanced at the ceiling and froze. There, suspended above me as if the laws of physics no longer applied, was a figure. Not crouching, not leaning, not standing, but hanging impossibly, defying logic. Its hollow face tilted down, grinning in a way that mirrored my own deepest terror. And for the first time I saw it move toward me without walking, sliding, crawling, bending shadows into its body, until it hovered directly above my chest. Its presence pressed into me, and I realized with absolute certainty that it had been inside me all along, shaping me, learning me, waiting. And as it whispered a soundless word that reverberated in my mind, I understood the horrifying truth. I was no longer alone, and I never would be again. I tried everything I could think of to fight it. Locks, bolts, blocking mirrors, candles, symbols scrawled in haste on walls and floors. Nothing worked. The dark passenger didn't follow rules, didn't care about boundaries. It wasn't a ghost I could exorcise, a demon I could banish, or a shadow I could hide from. It was patient, clever, and relentless. I began to realize it wasn't just haunting. MIT was rewriting me, shaping reality around me, testing the edges of my mind, finding the cracks where fear could seep in. The time no longer existed in a meaningful way. Days merged into nights, nights into hours. I couldn't tell if I had been awake or asleep, because the moment I closed my eyes, the dark passenger invaded my mind. It whispered, it showed me visions, it replayed my fears, until they became more vivid than reality. I would see my apartment crumbling, walls sagging and blackening, the floor curling like paper, shadows pooling into forms that writhed like living things. And always, moving through the destruction, was that hollow figure, gliding with impossible grace, grinning without speaking. I stopped attempting normalcy. I stopped leaving the apartment, the street, the world outside. It all felt like another layer of its control. Figures outside stared too long, shadows twisted unnaturally at the edges of my vision. And I couldn't tell if they were part of the dark passenger's influence or my own unraveling mind. I began to talk to myself, testing my own memory, reminding myself who I was. But even my thoughts felt invaded, intercepted, rewritten. It knew what I would think before I thought it. It shaped my fears before I even recognized them. The hallucinations became waking visions. I would glance at the floor and see cracks opening, darkness spilling up like smoke, forming shapes that were human only at first glance. A shadow would stretch along the ceiling, then fold over itself, coming closer with impossible speed. I began to dread my own reflection. Even a shiny surface, my phone screen, a kitchen knife, a dark window could betray me, showing not my face but its hollow mimicry of me, grinning, waiting. Sometimes, when I reached toward it, my reflection would smile wider, mocking my attempt to reclaim myself. The apartment had become a maze of fear. Every room felt alive, watching, breathing. The walls throbbed with presence. The floor creaked under invisible weight. Shadows pooled unnaturally in corners, rising up like smoke when I stepped too close. I could no longer tell which were real, which were created by the dark passenger. And when I closed my eyes, I saw it everywhere, gliding above me, crawling across walls, standing impossibly tall in corners, tilting its head, studying me. Then came the night that broke me entirely. I awoke to an unnatural silence, colder than anything I had ever felt. The apartment was dark, but I could see the shadows moving on their own, stretching and folding as though alive. And then I heard a voice, not a whisper, not a murmur, but a voice speaking my name. My blood ran cold. It wasn't mine, yet it carried the inflection of familiarity, the cadence of someone I knew. But it was wrong, distorted, slow, deliberate. I froze, unable to move, paralyzed by the fear of acknowledging its presence. I turned, slowly, inch by inch, and there it was. Taller than the ceiling, impossibly long-limbed, its hollow face grinning wider than logic allowed. But this time it was closer, closer than I had ever felt it before. I could feel its weight and invisible pressure pressing into my chest, making every breath a struggle. It didn't walk, it didn't crawl, it flowed across the floor in a way that defied physics, its dark coat dragging shadows behind it, and then it stopped, just inches from me. I could feel its cold exhaling against my skin, smelled the faint metallic temps of something ancient and wrong. The worst part, the moment that made my chest tighten until I thought it would break, was the realization that it had claimed my senses completely. My sight, my hearing, my thoughts. It was inside me now, and I couldn't tell where I ended and it began. I tried to push it away, to focus on my own existence, to cling to the remnants of who I was. But it laughed, not aloud, not with words, but in a way that reverberated inside my skull. It whispered a single word that froze every fiber of my being. Mine. I sank to the floor, trembling, unable to escape the crushing weight of its presence. And as I looked at the shadows pooling around me, bending and twisting unnaturally, I understood the terrible truth. This was no longer just a haunting. I wasn't being watched anymore. I wasn't being hunted. I had been claimed, and there was no way out. I woke to find my apartment gone. Not just messy or altered, completely gone. The familiar walls, the furniture, the small things that had anchored me to reality, they were all gone. In their place stretched a vast darkness, endless yet suffocating, a void that pressed against me from all sides. I tried to call out, tried to tell myself it was a dream, a hallucination, but my voice dissolved into the empty air. I was alone, or so I thought. Then I saw it, the dark passenger, standing at the far edge of the void, taller than I had ever seen it, its hollow face grinning wider than logic could allow. The black coat it wore shimmered unnaturally, absorbing the faint, non-existent light of the void. Its presence was heavier than gravity, more real than the air that wasn't there. And then I realized that face was mine. Not exactly mine, but a perfect mimic, my features twisted and hollowed, smiling back at me with terrible knowledge. I had never been the passenger in my life. I had been the vessel all along. Panic surged, but it was meaningless. I couldn't move. My limbs refused to respond, my mind trapped somewhere between terror and disbelief. The hollow face stepped closer, flowing across the void without touching the non-existent ground. It tilted its head, examining me, and for the first time I understood the scope of its patience. It hadn't just followed me, haunted me, or invaded my mind. It had been waiting for this moment, shaping me, learning me, ensuring that when it finally revealed itself fully, I would have no escape, no defense, no resistance. I could feel it reaching into me, not physically, but spiritually, mentally, like it was drawing out the essence of who I was and twisting it to match its own form. The void seemed to pulse with its presence. I realized I could no longer distinguish my thoughts from its influence. Every fear, every memory, every desire I had was now accessible to it, weaponized against me, mirrored back in ways that made my own existence unbearable. The dark passenger wasn't just outside me anymore, it was me, and I was it, yet somehow separate, trapped in a liminal space between identity and annihilation. I thought of fleeing, of running through the void, but there was nowhere to go. The space had no edges, no doors, no exits, only the endless, oppressive blackness and the figure that moved with predatory precision. Shadows, if they could even be called that, writhed at the edges of the void, extensions of the passenger itself, waiting to coil around me, to pull me closer, to consume what little of me remained. My chest ached under the pressure of its gaze, and the void hummed, a low vibration that seemed to resonate in my bones, whispering, "You belong to me now." Then, something worse. In the distance, faintly, I saw another figure, like a shadow of myself, small and trembling. peering from a corner of nothingness. Its eyes were wide with terror, and I recognized it instantly, a version of me, trapped in some other layer of the void, possibly another dimension, possibly a memory. And it was watching me as I watched the passenger, as if our fates were mirrors of one another, reflections trapped in an infinite cycle. It was a process, repeated countless times, over countless victims, each one becoming a vessel, each one feeding the dark passenger, teaching it, perfecting it. I tried to scream, to fight, to reclaim the fragments of myself, but the hollow face leaned in closer, and I could feel its influence threading through every thought, every nerve, until my identity felt like a thin, fragile thread about to snap. The grin widened, impossibly wide, and in that moment, I understood the truth. The dark passenger wasn't a being I could defeat. It wasn't a haunting I could escape. It was eternal, patient, consuming, and I had already failed. The last thing I remember before the void swallowed everything was my own reflection speaking, in a voice that was mine but not mine. Now you ride with me forever. I realized, with a cold, suffocating certainty, that wherever I go, whatever I see, I will never be alone. Somewhere inside me, the dark passenger waits, patient and unending, and the world I once knew has ceased to exist. And yet, even as the void consumed me, I could sense it another shadow, another flicker of movement, another vessel, waiting. I am gone, but the dark passenger is not, and somewhere, someone else will wake to find that it has already arrived,